Okay, so let's unpack this. We're charting the very beginnings of Jamaica. Millions of years of tectonic fury, right up to the sophisticated emergence and really the inspiring persistence of its first people, the Taino.
And we're looking at sources that detail these incredible contrasts. You've got the violent, crushing formation of the island itself, and then almost immediately after, the arrival of this deeply harmonious indigenous culture. The Arawaks, who became the Taíno, they somehow learned to live perfectly with all that volatility.
That contrast is absolutely key, isn't it? Our mission here, for you listening, is really to move past those old history books, the ones that basically declared this civilization extinct.
Yeah.
We want to reveal the true story.
The story of resilience.
Exactly. We want to answer that core question. Why is a culture that was essentially written out of history now actively reclaiming its language, its identity, its presence today?
And if you think about the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
the foundation of modern Jamaica, it's not just one simple story, it's this composite, that chaos of natural birth, and then the profound ingenuity of the first people who actually settled it.
So let's start that story where, well, all island stories really have to begin.
Mm-hmm.
The geology, we're talking deep sea violence.
Yeah.
On a geologic scale, just try to imagine the Earth's crust convulsing, tectonic plates clashing, colliding under the sea for millions of years. It wasn't just lifting the land, it was fundamentally cracking the crust, forcing molten rock up towards the surface.
Yeah, it wasn't a quick lift at all. It was this battle where the heavier oceanic plate was trying to dive beneath the lighter Caribbean plate. And this relentless pressure, it created these immense fault lines, unleashed violent earthquakes, which, by the way, are still active today. What eventually rose from that incredibly violent pressure cooker was just spectacular geography.
And the result of all that violence, a land of these dramatic extremes. That collision sculpted this majestic central spine of mountains, really cleanly divides the north from the south, These ridiculously steep ridges just tumbling straight down to the sea.
And if you look specifically at the eastern third of the island, that's where the pressure was most intense, pushing the land even higher, generating the really formidable Blue Mountains. It's an incredibly young landscape, geologically speaking, rugged, fragile even.
But time, of course, it starts to refine the chaos. Rain falls, rivers carve their paths, the deep green forests take root. And this rugged island was eventually given its perfect name by the people who arrived next, Jamaica.
Meaning land of wood and water. It fits perfectly.
It really does. So the land was ready. But how long until its first inhabitants actually arrived?
Right, now we have to shift our timeline quite a bit. Forward thousands of years. We need to focus on the original Arawak people. These were master mariners originating far to the south, down in the lush rainforests of the Orinoco River Valley, northern South America.
And their journey northward, up through that vast chain of the Antilles Islands, that was a true feat of exploration and navigation.
Absolutely.
They weren't using maps and compasses like we think of them. They were guided by this expert, almost intrinsic knowledge of the stars, the ocean currents, nature's most subtle rhythms.
And they needed some pretty incredible technology to match that ambition, right? Their watercraft, they used these specialized sails woven from the leaves of the Maurice palm. But the real feat, the truly amazing part, was the construction of the canoas. The canoes.
Now, wait a second. The sources mention estimates of 70 to over 100 paddlers in a single canoe.
That's right.
How do you even engineer stability for an oceanic voyage with a massive single tree trunk? I mean, that sounds almost logistically impossible without modern tools.
Yeah. Well, that's where the genius of their material science, their craftsmanship really comes in. The Spanish chroniclers, they actually describe these vessels, often dug out from huge silk cotton trees.
Correct.
And they describe them as being incredibly stable, capable of carrying not just all those people, but also all the supplies needed for long-term settlement. It just shows an unbelievable scale of craftsmanship.
And a deep understanding of hydrodynamics, I guess.
Exactly. To be able to island hop hundreds of miles northward like that.
So they were driven by these ancestral tales, maybe, of fertile islands further north. They pressed on and eventually established permanent settlements in Jamaica around, 650 AD, somewhere there?
Yeah, estimates around 650 AD. And the sources suggest that by the time foreign sails appeared, nearly 1,000 years later, they had established something like 200 distinct villages right across the island.
Wow, over 200?
And this is really where the Arawaks fully transition into becoming the Taíno, a word that, interestingly, just translates to the good or noble people. And this is where their highly organized life in Jamaica truly flourished.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because the picture we get is of this highly organized, communal, and actually very peaceful society.
Right. Their structure was hierarchical, sure, but the system seems designed for, efficiency and community welfare.
Their villages were centered on the cacique, the
Yeah.
chief. His larger home, the caney, that was the hub. Ceremonial life, political life, it all happened.
And the villagers themselves, they lived in these circular homes called bohíos, thatched roofs.
Yeah.
And they slept, apparently quite comfortably, in cotton hammocks, the very first hammocks.
Which is amazing in itself. The social dynamics, too, they have some fascinating details. It was a paternal society, right? And while a typical man might have maybe 2 or 3 wives, the cacique, the chief, often practiced polygamy, sometimes having up to 30 wives, which sounds like a lot. But sources say it was considered a tremendous honor for a woman to be associated with the chief. He held the community's welfare in his hands, essentially.
But their true ingenuity, I think, which speaks directly to that harmony with nature we mentioned, it lay in their agriculture. Their approach to farming wasn't just, planting seeds. It was landscape engineering.
That's right. They grew staples like maize, sweet potatoes, yams, tobacco as well.
Yeah.
But they absolutely mastered cassava.
Which is notoriously difficult.
Exactly. It's a vital source of starch, but it contains cyanide toxins. They have to be meticulously processed out before you can eat it.
And they developed the specific technology just for this. They use something called the sebican. It's this sophisticated woven press designed to squeeze the poisonous liquid out from the shredded cassava root before they could bake the remaining pulp into this flatbread. But the real land innovation, the big one, was the conuco.
The conucos. These huge, specially packed agricultural mounds, like large gardens built up with leaves, organic material.
Precisely. They were engineered specifically to improve drainage and aeration, which is absolutely critical in a rugged, rainy, tropical place like Jamaica. This prevented the kind of devastating soil erosion that those heavy Caribbean rains would normally cause. They were actively shaping the difficult landscape the volcanoes had created for them.
That just speaks to an incredible level of resource management, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And here's a detail I found particularly clever, talking about ingenuity, how they sourced their protein.
Yeah.
They fished, they hunted small game, sure, but they had this kind of symbiotic relationship with nature. We know from sources that they used the remora fish, the ones that attach themselves to bigger creatures.
Right, the suckerfish.
Yeah. They apparently used them to help catch sea turtles. I mean, talk about working with the ecosystem, not against it.
That's pretty amazing. And their leisure time was equally developed, which indicates, a stable, thriving culture. They enjoyed music, dancing, storytelling, and that famous ball game played on the ceremonial plazas, the Beidais, using rubber balls, apparently.
And their spirituality, it sounds like it was complex, really central to their society. They believed in this dual world, physical and spiritual kind of coexisting.
Right. The physical world guided by unseen forces. And they honored Zemis.
The Zimis weren't just simple idols, were they? They were these sacred figures, ancestral spirits, maybe nature gods, often carved from stone or bone or wood. They were understood as conduits to the spiritual realm.
Exactly. And the entire belief system was overseen by the vihiks, the shamans. They guided the rituals, the offerings, interpreted the spiritual world.
Now, before we move into the tragedy that followed, we really have to pause on the linguistic footprint that Taino left behind. It's incredible. Their influence is so pervasive, we use their words every single day without even realizing it.
It really is a remarkable testament to their cultural reach, even after everything. The Taíno language gave us barbacoa,
Barbecue?
which became barbecue, right? Hamaca, canoa,
Canoe.
the canoe, and perhaps most dramatically, hurricane,
Hurricane.
which we know as hurricane. These are living words from a civilization that was officially declared dead.
A lasting legacy of language from a people whose population numbered, in the tens of thousands across the island? And while they were largely peaceful, the sources do note they had to defend themselves sometimes against the more warlike Caribs from other islands down in the Lesser Antilles, using clubs, poisoned arrows.
Yeah, that was a persistent regional threat, it seems. But the true, tragic shift that came with the appearance of those foreign sails in 1494.
Columbus.
The arrival of Christopher Columbus. It marked the sudden, devastating end of one era and the start of a terrible transformation.
And Columbus's own perspective, even from his first meeting with Taínos in the Bahamas, that was 2 years earlier. It's chilling when you read it now. He observed their generosity, and I'm quoting directly from the sources here. They will give all that they do possess. They do not carry arms or know them. They should be good servants.
Oh, that combination, Their perceived generosity and openness, coupled with their complete lack of immunity to European diseases, it just set the stage for rapid, brutal exploitation. It was, well, a perfect storm of vulnerability meeting ruthless ambition.
The outcome was swift
Yeah.
and tragic. The Spanish quickly enslaved the indigenous people, forced them into brutal, hard labor, especially digging for gold, which wasn't even that plentiful in Jamaica.
Right.
That combination of just ruthless exploitation and these devastating new European diseases, smallpox, measles, influenza, it led to a catastrophic demographic collapse. I mean, just wiped them out. A Spanish governor later reported back to the crown, basically, that the indigenous people were gone. His words were something like, none. They are gone.
And that just became the accepted historical narrative for centuries.
Yeah.
Extinction. Total disappearance. But that popular narrative, it's really problematic, isn't it?
Deeply problematic.
Yeah.
Because how did they survive? We have to introduce this powerful counter-narrative. You often hear it summarized today as, I am not extinct. And it's rooted in documented cultural and, importantly, genetic intermingling.
The historical records, they're contested by this evidence that Taino women facing just overwhelming pressure, married or cohabitated with the Spanish conquistadors initially, and then later, crucially, with the Africans who were forcibly imported to work the sugar plantations.
Right. And this intermingling is absolutely critical for understanding the roots of the Maroons.
Exactly. When the Spanish started importing enslaved Africans in large numbers, many fled. Escaped into the dense, isolated interior mountains to get away from that brutal bondage.
And what's fascinating here is the origin of the word maroon itself. It actually comes from an Arawak word, simra, which apparently means both arrow and rebel. How fitting is that? That indigenous Arawak word became the Spanish cimarron, which eventually evolved into the English word we use, maroon.
Wow, so their fight for freedom was literally built on an indigenous linguistic foundation.
It seems so. And the oral history, passed down for generations within the Maroon communities, it strongly suggests that Taíno refugees who had already sought refuge deep in those impenetrable blue mountains they intermingled, they formed families with those escaped Africans. They were co-resisting, basically, far away from the plantations.
And this isn't just oral history anymore, is it? There's science backing this up now.
Exactly. Recent research has provided real scientific validation. Genetic studies, conducted by the University of Notre Dame, working directly with the Accompong Town Maroons. They confirmed what the oral traditions had been saying all along.
So what did the DNA show?
The analysis confirmed that while the Maroons are, yes, overwhelmingly of African descent genetically, they do contain significant indigenous American ancestry, tangible proof.
So the research provides concrete genetic validation to hundreds of years of oral history about that coexistence, about family formation in those resistance communities up in the mountains.
It's a powerful living victory against erasure, isn't it? The Yamaye, or Jamaican Taino population, is estimated at about 3,000 individuals today. They are not a historical footnote, they are a living community, actively reclaiming their heritage, asserting their presence, often alongside the Maroon communities. The storied resilience is absolutely ongoing.
So if we try to connect all this back to the bigger picture, you really have to remind yourself that the deep history of Jamaica, it's this incredible story of sophisticated human adaptation, technical innovation, and just unbelievable cultural resistance that survived against immense historical odds, against purposeful erasure.
Yeah. So think about this. Every time you use a word like hurricane, or maybe eat food off a barbecue, you are interacting directly with the living legacy of a civilization that history books genuinely tried to write out of existence.
And that raises a really important question for you, the listener, to consider, I think. Despite all those historical records claiming they were extinct, the Taino story lives on, in language, in genetics, in culture. So when an entire civilization is effectively written out of history, what essential knowledge are we losing? Knowledge about harmony with nature, about sustainability, about resilience, knowledge that maybe we're unknowingly losing or perhaps only just now beginning to rediscover.